Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Word of Faith Response. My name is Gerald Sutherland, Associate Pastor of the Word of Faith Fellowship, and we're so happy to be with you this morning. Beautiful, frosty morning in Rutherford County, or wherever you happen to be, listening on the radio or watching the replay on the internet. We're so happy to have you with us. We've come to you every day, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, from 8:30 to 9 o'clock on WCAB, AM and FM. And we're so happy to be a part of what God is doing in the world today. And we've come to bring testimony to you about the saving power of Jesus Christ and what he's done to change the lives of many, many people, not only here, but around the world, wherever people will open their hearts and let him come in. I'm excited today because I have a good friend with me today. We've been friends for 30 years, and I've seen him grow in the things of the Lord. We've been through a lot together, haven't we, Jeff?
We have.
And but we're looking forward to many more days to serve God and to do his will. And Jeff and I were talking before coming on the air about the radio program's been on for a year. The radio program, many people have come from our church to share what God has done to change their hearts and lives. Many people from all over the world. And so, again, we're grateful to be here. And Jeff, share with them what God's done in your life.
Okay, thank you, and I'm real grateful to be here. I'm grateful for this opportunity to get to share with everyone. I was born and raised in Owensboro, Kentucky, which is in the northern part of the state on the Ohio River. I grew up going to church. My family went pretty much every Sunday, but I came to realize that it was more of a social event. I don't honestly remember learning much about God in that church. We weren't told to read a Bible. I really couldn't tell you anything I learned. We just went there to meet with friends. Somewhere probably around 9th or 10th grade, I was probably 14, 15, or 16, I felt like there was more to God than what I was getting in the church that I was going to. And I started seeking, but I really didn't even know what I was seeking. I didn't know enough about God or Jesus or anything to know where to go to try to find him. I started going to every service I could go to. I actually started trying to read my Bible, but I really didn't understand much of what I was reading. Again, we weren't taught to read it. And I wasn't really getting any closer. And by the time I graduated high school, which I'd probably been seeking probably 2, 3, 4 years, I just gave up. I just stopped going to church. I went on to college, went to a couple of different denominational churches, but I felt like, well, it was pretty much the same thing. They just kind of juggled up the order of the service. So I just stopped going to church altogether after that. I would occasionally go when I came home to visit with my parents. I really believe, I'll back up a little bit, I believe that God, you get to a point in your life where you want to give your heart to God. Right. And God starts drawing you. It's kind of like Jesus coming by Peter and saying, "Come, follow me." And that's that drawing power of God trying to pull you towards him. And back in 9th, 10th grade, that's what I was trying to do. I was trying to find God. When I didn't find God, when I couldn't see I was getting any closer to him, then I turned to give my heart to something else. And I look back, my dad he got in the Army Reserve back probably in the 1950s. He graduated college. He taught middle school shop, industrial arts, for a couple of years. And then he became a federal employee and was a technician at a reserve center. So it was kind of like we were a military family. except we didn't have to move. I was around military all the time. I would go down to the Reserve Center quite often, and the military was a big part of my dad's life. And I believe it was around 11th grade, the summer between 11th and 12th grade. I went to a meeting. He had to go to a division headquarters for a meeting, and I went with him. And him and all the guys went out to lunch. And I remember all these guys were talking about their sons and what their sons were doing in the military. And my dad was totally silent because neither me or my brother really had expressed any kind of desire about going into the military. But again, that was a big part of his life, and I know that he probably wanted one of us to go in, if not both of us. So I felt really sorry for him. And at that point, I can see where my heart was turned towards making him happy. I couldn't find God, I couldn't find Jesus, so I decided I would please my dad.
Don't you think that's a common thread with a lot of people?
Yes.
They start off their lives and they think they're going this direction, and they realize that's not taking me anywhere, and they go another direction, and then they start groping for something, and really what they're groping for is God.
That's right. Because you're wanting to give your heart to something.
Mm-hmm.
And it should be God, but if you can't find it, you will find something else.
Yes.
The devil will make sure he finds something for you to give it to, and it won't be pulling you towards God. So anyway, in January of '82, this was of my senior year, I actually joined the military. I was in a special program that allowed me to join actually before I got out of high school. So for the last half of my senior year, I was actually going to reserve meetings and what they call drilling while I was still in high school. And I know that probably made my dad really happy. Now, in May of that year of 1982, that's when I went to Fort Jackson, South Carolina for basic training. And, basic training's rough. I think anybody that's been in the military would tell you that's probably an eye-opening experience for anybody. Well, I'd never been away from home. I'd never been away from my parents for more than a day or two. And suddenly I was at Fort Jackson, and I had never been through anything like that in my life. But I could see how even when I wasn't serving God, I wasn't actively seeking Him at that time, His hand was still on my life to help me get through the things that I needed to go through. Because, my dad'd been in the military for years. If I had quit, and believe me, after about day 2, I was thinking about it. If I'd quit or if I had failed basic, it would have been a major embarrassment to him. Because that's what he would have had to say next to me. Well, my son didn't even make it through basic training. So I know God was there. He was helping me. He provided me a friend right from the beginning. And actually, that friend broke his leg. He had had a broken leg, and it re-separated. And I thought, if he goes home, I don't know what I'm going to do. But it took them so long to process him out that I had gotten stable, and I was functioning through it and made it through basic training. So anyway, I stayed in the military for approximately 9 years. And I went off to college. They let me start ROTC as a junior. I skipped the first 2 years because I'd been to basic. So at the end of my sophomore year, I was commissioned as a second lieutenant, and I stayed in for 9 years, made it to the rank of captain. And in 1991, I just really felt like I had done my duty and it was time to get out. Felt that's what God was telling me to do. Now, I'm going to back up just a little bit. I graduated college in 1986, and I pretty much immediately went to work for a small junior college at that time. It was in the same town that the college I graduated was from.
Which was in Kentucky.
It was in the southern part of the state,
Okay.
in Bowling Green, Kentucky. I went to Western Kentucky University. So I started working at this small junior college. Well, it was a privately owned one, and the owner was fairly crooked. He was not doing things the way he was supposed to be doing them, and pretty much everybody at that little college, again, it wasn't big, it was a very small one, knew that he was going to get shut down. So everybody was kind of looking for jobs and going different places gradually. Well, the lady that had hired me at that junior college, she had moved to South Carolina and gone to work for a beauty school as one of the administrators. And I guess she'd been there a couple of months, and she called me and she said, "You're probably going to be looking for a job, so would you want to come work for me?" I didn't even think about it and told her yes. Well, that absolutely had to have been God, because there is no way in the world I would have wanted to be a beauty school recruiter. And that's what I was coming to do. In fact, at the time she called me and I took that job, I was actually at I was at Fort Knox at a military school. And my dad was actually the commandant of the school. And when I told him, he looked at me, he said, "You're going to do what?" So I know that was God, because if I had thought about it, I think sometimes God just blinds you to things.
He does.
To get you into His will.
Mm-hmm.
If I thought about it for 2 seconds, I had a friend up at the college at the university, a major state university, that could have gotten me a job there. And I would have probably taken that job and still been in Kentucky today. But that was not the plan of God for me.
You know, as you were sharing that, I was reminded of Scripture in the book of Jeremiah, where God said, "I know the thoughts and plans that I have for you." Not your thoughts and plans, but God's thoughts and plans. Thoughts for and plans for your welfare and for your peace, and not for evil. To do you good.
That's right.
To give you hope in your final outcome. That's what was happening in your life. You didn't even know it.
That's right. I didn't know it. And if I'd gone with my plans, I'd have probably really had a mess. But I took that, and within 2 weeks, I was gone. I packed up and left pretty much everything that I knew. I left my family, I left my friends, and moved to South Carolina. Now, in fact, I'm not even sure I knew where South Carolina was. But moved and started working at the beauty school as a recruiter. Now, the recruiting part didn't last too long because I was not that good of a recruiter. But ends up, I became the director of the school. And was running a beauty school. So definitely not anything I had ever planned on doing. But there was a reason that I was at that school. Because that's where I met my wife. Sarah. My wife she was in college. She was not doing real well. College was just not the thing she was supposed to do. And her parents finally pulled her out before it completely destroyed her life. Mm-hmm. She had never really wanted to go to college. She wanted to be a hairstylist. That's what she had always wanted to do, but her family did not feel that was the thing for her, and so that she needed to go to college. Well, they pulled her out, and as soon as they got her out, what did she do? She went to beauty school, and that's where I happened to be. I can even look back at her life, if she hadn't have gone to college, I would not have been there at the time she got there. She would have already, if she'd gone straight into beauty school, she would have already finished up and been gone before I ever got there.
And the timing of God is perfect.
It is. It is. It absolutely is. Now, it was interesting. One of the lady that was actually the recruiter at the time I became the director, she actually is the one that paired me and Sarah up. She told me Sarah wanted to go out with me, and then told Sarah that I wanted to go out with her, and it was all a big lie. Neither one of us knew anything about the other one.
But God was even using her.
But God was using her because Sarah was the one I was supposed to meet. And the reason why is because Sarah was going to Gerald and Linda's church. At this, we had probably been out 2 or 3 or 4 times, and she invited me to go to church with her. Now, again, I had not been to church by at that point, probably over 6 years.
Mm-hmm.
I was never opposed to going to church. I mean, it wasn't like I hated God or anything like that. I just couldn't find him. So she invited me to church, and I said, sure, I'll go with you.
That was 1988?
That was 1988, because
Right.
I moved to South Carolina in 1987.
And Linda and I have been pastoring there in the Greenville area since 1978. God had us begin a church there. And so that's where we were when we met you.
Right. That's right. Well, Sarah invited me. I went to church, and that first service, I knew I'd found what I was looking for back when I was 14, 15, 16. Because I finally found a place where they were actually teaching about how to serve God, how to have a relationship with God. Y'all were teaching about Jesus, and things were just making sense. You were teaching to read the Bible. I started reading. I started understanding. I started growing spiritually. So I knew I had found the place where I was supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I told Sarah after that first service, when's the next one? Because I'm ready to come back. And that had not been the case growing up. I mean, I kind of got to the point where I dreaded Sundays because you just weren't getting anything. I'd go home most Sundays with a headache. So I had finally found the path that God wanted me to be on.
And that's the only place where you find peace.
Yeah, and that was the big thing. Was
Is
I
being
had
in the
peace.
will of God and knowing when you lay your head down at night, you have peace, knowing that God is in control of your life.
Absolutely.
And that's what people are looking for all over the world. There'll be people who will watch the replay of this program on the internet on the other side of the world from here.
Yeah.
You know, there are a lot of bad things about the internet, but there are some good things about it. And getting the gospel of Jesus Christ out to the world is a part of that. And that's part of why we're here today.
That's right. And God does have that plan. I mean, it took a lot. I look back, there are no coincidences.
No.
God's got a plan. Some of us tend to do everything we can to mess that plan up.
Right.
But if you've got 1 ounce of desire in your heart to serve God, He will pull you over back onto that path and do everything He can to keep you going towards Him. And that's what He was doing for me, because I look back, there's just so many things that happened to get me in the right place.
Mm-hmm.
Sarah and I we got married in 1990. And
I had the privilege of marrying him.
That's right. So we've been married for 28 years now, and we're very happy and serving God. Now, one of the things after we got married, of course, we wanted to have children. So we began trying to have children, and we went through 2 miscarriages.
Mm-hmm.
And those were extremely rough.
Difficult days.
Very difficult days. And the bottom line is we were striving to have children. We really weren't going to God and letting Him have control of our life and give us children when He was ready to give us
Right.
children. So what ended up happening is after that second miscarriage, we just completely put out of our mind children. We just figured it wasn't going to happen. We weren't going to have any children, so we just completely quit thinking about it. And I guess it was in 1996, Sarah felt like she was really bad sick. She felt like she had a major tumor. So we ended up, she went to the doctor, and the doctor examined her, and he said, yeah, you don't have a tumor, you're pregnant. And at that point, I think she was almost 3 months, and she was beyond the point where we normally would lose them. So in actuality, when we just stopped thinking about it, we had really put it into God's hands.
Right.
And what God ended up, he took all that torment away. We weren't, I remember with the second one, it was just horrible because we're doing everything we can to hang on to the child, and it just didn't happen. Well, now she was in good shape, and in April of '97, Benjamin was born, our son.
He's been a major blessing.
Yes, he has. I mean, I'm so grateful we had him, and we know he came from God because it wasn't anything we did.
That's right.
And it wasn't anything the doctors did. It was God, and he got us to that point. Benjamin's now 21, and in 2017, he married a wonderful young lady named Anna, and she is so we got blessed with a daughter.
We sure did, yeah.
So we are
She is a
very
blessing.
excited about that. So now we're up to 2002. Gerald and Linda, again, God's got a plan. Gerald and Linda happen to know Sam and Jane Whaley from the Word of
We
Faith
met
here.
Sam and Jane back in 1975, and just became very close friends. And then they were in a different area of ministry than we were, so we got separated somewhat, but we always stayed in touch with each other. And we've had a strong bond of relationship over the years.
Yeah. Well, we did in Greenville, we didn't have a Sunday night service.
Right.
So we would come, I guess for me, I think it was 92 or 93, we started coming up to Word of Faith on Sunday nights. We'd drive from Greenville. We'd come up to the Sunday night services. We'd come up for fellowships that they would have. Seminars, any special events. And we did this for 10 years, driving back and forth. Because we were all getting fed.
We were hungry.
We were getting the things of God taught to us. So in 2002, Gerald and Linda really got it from God that we were all to move up here, that we were to become part of the Word of Faith. The thing was, all the rest of us were getting that too. The majority of the people in the church were hearing exactly the same thing, so it was God speaking.
Yes.
There was no doubt. There was no resistance to that. We said, that's God. So in 2002, we moved up here, and look how, when we decided to move, God took care of everything. Benjamin had just he was 5, so he was getting ready to go into kindergarten. Well, I couldn't think of a better place for him to be than Word of Faith Christian School. So that's where he started school. That's where he graduated from. And he got the best education he could possibly get. And he had people taking care of him that loved him. And there were times he was a little bit of a handful. But he had people that cared about him and would help him. And I watched the education, and that's what I'm in. I'm in higher education. I work for a college. And God provided me a job when we moved up here.
And that was an amazing thing, too. People from our church who moved here needed jobs. They needed houses. They needed places, for people to help with their children and so forth. And God provided all that. It was absolutely supernatural.
He did, because I work in financial aid. Well, there was only one financial aid job in this county and it suddenly became open.
Right.
And I took it and worked here in the county for the next 12 years. Currently, I'm working back in South Carolina at another community college, but God provided that. He gave me a job. He gave us a house, and there at that time there were not that many houses up for sale, but He gave us perfect place. The house where we were was less than a mile from the church and less than a mile from where I was working. So it was just everything fell right into place. He gave my wife a job at the cafe at the mall. So I'd see how if you go the way of God, He will take care of you. He
That's
will
a key
provide everything.
And all of this, and the testimonies that all of our people share, the key is it is submission to God and to God's will that brings the blessings of God into your life.
That's right.
And people struggle and try to make things happen and do everything they know to do. But ultimately, it's just surrendering to God and saying, God, not my will, but your will.
That's right. And that was our part in the moving, was submitting. I want your will, God, and the will was to move. And I've never regretted it for a moment.
None of us
Not
have.
one moment, because I've watched my family grow spiritually. I watched my son go through school, and he's turned out to be a wonderful young man. I can't imagine being without Anna. Anna is such a part of our family. The daughter that we wanted, she's there, and I just can't imagine her not being there. So I'm so grateful for everything that happened. Personally, I can see how my relationship with God has grown. How much more I know about God and walking with Jesus. And finally, I'm where God wanted me back when I was 15, 16. My heart is turned towards Him. I've been giving my heart to Jesus. And I look forward. Getting up in the mornings and seeing what God has for me. I'm seeing how God has always been there for me. In my job, there's times we've run into some really difficult situations, and God's always been there.
I've had many phone calls, and Jeff would call and say, Gerald, I need you to pray today because I've got this situation, I've got that thing. And, without fail, every time we turn to God, He always answers.
It's true. As far as the church goes, you can't imagine. This is a group of people. They will do anything for you. Everybody in that church loves one another. We walk together. If there's a need, all you have to do is make a phone call, and there will be somebody to help you with that need.
And the lies and the allegations that have come out against our pastors, Sam and Jane, against the church, and yet we've been a year now coming to the radio station and sharing testimonies about what God has done to bless us and to bring us into a place to where we have no bitterness or resentment against anybody.
That's right.
Those that have been lying and making allegations against us, we would recognize that it's not them, it's the spirit behind what they're doing that's causing these attacks. And we love every one of them. Mm-hmm. And we're praying that God will open their eyes and they'll come to the knowledge of truth, because it's ultimately they who are going to suffer the consequences because of what they're doing. And they're attacking God. They're not attacking us.
That's right.
Because we're growing, we're continuing to do the will of God wherever God sends us, whatever God gives us to do. And so it's not hurting us at all. But the persecution is bringing us to a place where we recognize that we are still in need of change in our lives.
That's right. I've been with the church now for 25 years. I've never seen any abuse going on. I've just seen people loving on one another and helping each other to grow. One thing, about to run out of time, I want to mention real quick. I have been in higher education as an administrator for 32 years now. And I have worked with hundreds, if not thousands, of students. And part of my job is I help students that are having difficulties. Sometimes they're coming out of some really bad situations. Their home life is not good, or they didn't have things going well in high school, and I help those students, get the financial aid they need. But I watch a lot of them, and the ones that come out of an abusive environment, normally they have problems.
They do.
They struggle to perform well, and the thing is, I've watched pretty much everybody since I've been in the church. The young ones go to college. They don't struggle.
Right.
They are well prepared for college. They're not abused.
No.
I remember an admissions person. Whoop, we're out of time.
We're out of time. Jeff, thank you so much for being with us today. And we thank you for listening. We thank you for watching on the internet. You can go there. Our web page is wordoffaithfellowship.org. You have a wonderful day. Thank you for joining us.